Thank you, Brian. Good morning. It's so great to be here with all of you and seeing everybody here. And it was really great to see the kids and see how they've grown. It's just fantastic. So first of all, I want to let you know that this is the first of a series of social justice-led services that the committee has planned for you this church year on each fourth Sunday. The Social Justice Committee's intent is to engage with the congregation on social justice and environmental issues. For future services, we plan to incorporate periods of discussion into the services so we can learn from each other. So today's sermon topic is the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta. You might be asking yourself, why is this a topic of a sermon at NVUU? I hope I have answered this question by the end of my talk, but my goal is to make these points. The Delta is a natural wonder, a unique ecosystem that provides many benefits, including providing natural resilience from the threats of climate change. The mindset of resource exploitation and overuse by the mostly European settlers in the 19th and 20th centuries have imperiled this precious ecosystem. Climate change is already accelerating the threats that were set in motion 150 years ago. We need to pay attention and we need to support efforts to protect this jewel. I have a personal connection to the Delta. My father grew up on a dairy farm in Elk Grove, which is just east of the Delta. When I was a kid, I lived in Walnut Creek, and our family would make several day trips each year to my grandparents' farm. The shortest path was through the Delta. My brother and sisters and I enjoyed the car ride through the area on the levee roads. There were several drawbridges to cross, sometimes causing delays. The water looked inviting at times and threatening at others, depending on the season and the weather. I remember noticing how the fruit trees and cornfields on the dry side of the levees look lower than the water level in the river. And no, this is not an optical illusion. During a couple of winter evenings driving home, I was very thankful that my dad could safely navigate the pea soup tule fog that we had to go through. When we moved to Benicia in 2007, after many years away from the Bay Area, I made up an excuse to drive through the Delta. I saw that it had changed very little. The fields and the small towns were still there, unlike the boom of growth in Walnut Creek and Concord during my absence. I learned later that the outward appearance belied the environmental changes that had been occurring. I think the natural environments like marshes are hard to comprehend or appreciate. We can easily appreciate the grandeur of Half Dome or the stands of redwoods, but the beauty and the value of the Delta is more diffuse and ephemeral. While preparing for this talk, I learned so much about the issues. I learned things I didn't even know to ask about before. One excellent source for me is our friend Reiner Honecker, who gave a presentation in Benicia several years ago when I was on the Benicia's Sustainability Commission. We invited Reiner to come and talk about the Delta, and he shared a lot of knowledge and provided some great reference documents for us. So here, I'm going to now present a short lesson about the Delta. And I promise it'll be short. To orient you, I'm going to ask May to bring up the map of the Delta area. So here's a satellite photo of the Delta area, and you can see, the cities on there, and it's pretty much considered to be, some maps say, oh, it includes Suisun Bay, some say it doesn't, but generally it's east of Suisun Bay and stretching out north towards Sacramento and south to Stockton, the triangle outlined shown on this map. Okay, so before the many changes that our California ancestors completed, the Delta was a confluence of about 50% of the total water flowing in rivers in California. The largest rivers, the Sacramento and the San Joaquin, drain the Sierra Nevada mountains, Mount Shasta, Mount Lassen, and the eastern side of the Coast Range. Much of the water is now diverted or siphoned off. More on that later. A million years ago, the Central Valley was a huge inland sea. Water was blocked on the west side of the sea by the Coast Range. However, water is a powerful landscaping changing force, and eventually, about 500,000 years ago, the water from the inland sea carved the Carquinez Strait, San Francisco Bay, and the Golden Gate to find its way to the Pacific Ocean. The path of the sea was still very restricted, and as sea level rose during the end of the last ice age, the Delta area became a huge freshwater wetland. The water flowed slowly through the Delta, dropping sediments and building islands. This geologic origin makes California's Delta truly unique. Geologically, it's not considered a true river delta, but rather an inverted river delta, as it is formed inward with the sediment accumulating progressively inland rather than outward, like, say, maybe the Mississippi River Delta. The only other river delta in the world that is located so far inland is the Pearl River Delta in China. The Delta formation had stabilized to its pre-1850 shape about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Now take a look what the Delta looked like then and what it looks like now with this next slide. So the picture on the left, maybe it's hard to see all the names of the different colors, but on the left, that what would you call that color? Sort of turquoise, yeah, is all freshwater wetland, and then there's seasonal wetland, sort of the lime green on the fringes. And because of some of the things that we'll talk about on the right, you can see because of the draining that took place, that it's almost all agricultural land now. And then you have a few channels of the main flow. So it's just a complete transformation of the topography. So let's see. As described in the readings, the Delta was tremendously rich in flora and fauna. Try imagining it: huge swath of tule plants, islands of majestic oaks, willows, and alders, abundant herds of elk tracked by grizzly bears. The rivers were full of salmon. It was reported that a person could almost walk across the river on the backs of salmon at times. This only scratches the surface of the biodiversity of the area. At high tide, in the summer months, when river flow was especially low, the salinity of the water would increase. The plants and the animals evolved to thrive in this changing environment. I think it is especially difficult to understand what the Delta area meant for the indigenous people who lived in and near the Delta. At the time of first contact, it is estimated to 3,000 to 15,000 people, primarily Miwok and Medu, lived in small villages on the eastern edge of the Delta, which were less likely to flood. They made extensive use of the tule plants. The reed fibers were used to make baskets, houses, boats, and garments. They harvested tule roots, pollen, and acorn, as well as the plentiful fish and game. These people managed the landscape sustainably for thousands of years, but in a very short period of time, their way of life was destroyed by the genocidal displacement of indigenous people in the 19th century. The settlers who came into California saw the Delta as a problem and an opportunity. The flat land, abundant water, and fresh soil were a tremendous opportunity for a farming family. However, the periodic floods were a big problem. The solution? Levees, built primarily by Chinese laborers to keep the lands dry. The Swampland Act, as mentioned in the reading, passed by Congress in 1850, provided free land up to 320 acres for people who built levees and drained the land. The land limit was lifted in 1868, bringing large agribusiness into the act. The transformation of the Delta was underway. About 400 square miles of land was reclaimed by 1900. Today, almost 800 square miles of land has been drained. The levees and draining set in motion dramatic changes in the Delta ecosystem, a downward spiral that continues today. The first half of the 20th century was a period when the water rush eclipsed the gold rush in California. For a deep dive, pardon the pun, into this water mania, I highly recommend the book Cadillac Desert by Mark Reisner. Again, California saw the Delta as a great source of water for dry land in the southern part of the state, which had flat, fertile soil, but no reliable source of water. As I mentioned earlier, about half of the total river flow in California flows through the Delta, and about 70% of that water, yes, 70% of the water is sent south to the Central Valley or pumped over the Tehachapi's to Southern California. This water has been the life source of California's agricultural economy for many years, but there's no free lunch. Pulling the water out of the Delta has also exacerbated the downward spiral that began with the water draining. The current problems caused mainly by agricultural use and by water exports are: 1, land subsidence caused by CO2 release from the drained farmland. When the peat was exposed to air after draining, decomposition has led to the lower land level, kind of like your compost pile, where you put a lot of stuff in that's rotting and the level drops. And that's what's happening in the Delta. Number 2, agricultural runoffs has led to higher nutrient levels and algae blooms. 3, huge decrease in fish population for many reasons. Number 4, increased salinity due to drought and the continued high pumping rate of water out of the Delta. Number 5, potential for catastrophic flooding if the levees fail due to undermining or earthquakes. You could have a cascading effect, like you have an earthquake and a levee breaks, the water's going to rush in and it could destroy other levees, and you could just at all in one fell swoop, just cover the agricultural land. The problems would still be with us without climate change, but climate change has made things much more complicated. There's less snowpack in the mountains, which will mean less water flow in the spring and more in the winter, and more unpredictable seasonal variations in flow. Higher water temperatures will further impact fish populations. Sea level rise will increase the salinity of the water in the Delta, which will impact both drinking water quality and agricultural water supply. Even with the degradation of the Delta ecosystem, the area is still a hotbed of biodiversity. more than 750 species inhabit the Delta. There's still so much to lose. How can the Delta be managed to save the ecosystem while minimizing the impact to the agricultural economy that is tied to it? The path we're on is leading to both environmental and economic calamity. It's hard to be optimistic. Let me share a few numbers. In California, the state water rights allocate more than 500% of total river flow. So it doesn't add up there, right? Delta management is unusually complex with more than 230 agencies involved, often with conflicting goals and values. And even if flows to Southern California were shut down tomorrow, that would lead to increased overpumping in groundwater in the San Joaquin Valley and impact the Colorado River Basin water rights issues. Habitat restoration is another big question mark. Environmental scientists don't have all the answers. They don't know necessarily what's going to work. The existing non-native species that thrive in the Delta and make up 98% of the biomass in the Delta, such as striped bass and largemouth bass, feed on native species. If agricultural tracts are flooded to provide more wetland, non-native vegetative species may outcompete native plants. Nonprofits such as Restore the Delta are helping to educate the public and fund scientific studies and restorative efforts. But the moneyed interests, primarily agribusinesses, have formidable political power. Unfortunately, the Delta is representative of so many other ecosystem jewels that are threatened. The exploitative attitude of our culture set in motion irreversible changes that we continue to deal with. The loss of so many square miles of wetland leaves us more vulnerable to global climate change and sea level rise. What can we do now? I think, first of all, we need to own our history and understand the many mistakes that were made. Secondly, our path forward needs to be guided by science. Third, we need to understand that business as usual won't cut it. Agricultural and other industries will need to adjust to use less water and eliminate dangerous runoff. Some agricultural land will need to be abandoned to restore wetlands. I want to finish today with a reading from the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. It's really a fantastic book. Hope you have a chance to read it. So here's the quote. After all these generations since Columbus, some of the wisest of native elders still puzzle over the people who came to our shores. They look at the toll on the land and say, the problem with these new people is that they don't have both feet on the shore. One is still in the boat. They don't seem to know whether they're staying or not. The same observation is heard from some contemporary scholars who see in the social pathologies and relentlessly materialistic culture the fruits of homelessness, a rootless past. America has been called the home of second chances. For the sake of the people and the land, the urgent work of second man may be to set aside the ways of the colonists and become indigenous to place. But can Americans, as a nation of immigrants, learn to live here as if we were staying with both feet on the shore? What happens when we truly become native to place? when we finally make a home, where are the stories that lead the way? If time does, in fact, eddy back on itself, maybe the journey of first man will provide footsteps to guide the journeys of the second, end quote. Let us embrace the possibility that we can follow first man's footsteps for all of our sakes and for future generations.
Thank you, David. Love is the spirit of this church and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Once a month, our congregation donates our offering to a local organization that shares our values. Today, that organization is La Clínica Vallejo. La Clínica Vallejo is part of La Clínica de la Raza. This organization was founded 50 years ago to improve the quality of life for communities by providing accessible healthcare for all. Today, La Clínica is the first choice for multilingual, full scope healthcare services in the East Bay, regardless of a patient's income level or insurance status. They're proud to have matured into a leading healthcare institution renowned for providing culturally and linguistically appropriate services to diverse and underserved populations. La Clínica Vallejo is located in the heart of downtown Vallejo in a new 26,000 square foot facility. The culturally diverse staff provides comprehensive healthcare services to the whole family. Staff pride ourselves in giving personalized individual care to the families they serve, including newborns, adolescents, adults, and seniors. In addition to medical and dental care, they offer a wide variety of services such as behavioral health, social services, health education, and a pharmacy assistance program. In the near future, they will begin offering optometry services. La Clínica Vallejo has strong established partnerships with the surrounding hospitals and specialty care providers. Please be generous. All cash and check donations will be sent to our Share the Plate recipient unless the check is marked pledge. And you can do that with cash by putting it in an envelope and writing pledge on that. All checks should be made out to NVUU. If you're donating online and you want it to go to the Share the Plate, you do need to write that in the memo line. You want to write Share the Plate. Okay,